Good morning, everyone. Good morning,
Good morning.
Gaetan. Good morning, Roman. And we have a special guest with us today, and this is Billie
Billy.
Gloom. Billie is with UPWARD Dogology, and today we are going to be talking about how do you look at dogs with a checkered past. This is a subject that we've really gotten involved with over a long period of time, knowing that a lot of people don't go after a dog or don't adopt a dog or even get associated with a dog if they think that they've been in fights or they've had a checkered past, like Billie says. So we're going to begin with that and going to move over here to, let me see. We're going to begin with Billie, and let Billie introduce herself and tell you what does she do. What do you do, Billie? Tell us about what you do as an expert in canine cognitive behavior therapy.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. I really appreciate it. And I love your show. I love what you do. I love everything about it. Well, every day is different. Every minute is different because I'm dealing with real people and real dogs every day. I'm sure Roman can appreciate that. So as a behaviorist, I work one-on-one with clients. So it's a lot of communication. It's not structured by the hour. I only work with dogs that are over 6 months of age. As far as the issues, it's very similar to other trainers, what the issues are. It really boils down to what's bothering people, and what their issues are and what it's stemming from. And everyone is different on how we work together and how we go through the program. I adhere to cognitive behavioral therapy when I work with dogs. And that's why I only work with dogs over the age of 6 months. So that's when they have cognitive skills as puppies. But over the age of 6 months, those cognitive skills are harnessed differently. So we use cognitive behavioral therapy to address the behaviors. Now, if traditional methods work and are effective, then that's great too. And by traditional methods, I mean conditioning or reinforcements. And that's great too. So when those are perhaps not working or are ineffective, or maybe just people need something different, or they feel like what they're doing isn't exactly working, or they're not bonding with their dog, or they just adopted a dog and the way that they're used to working with a dog isn't quite working, then that's when we would go to cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, can you explain to everyone what is cognitive behavioral therapy and how does it relate to dogs? Because a lot of people I don't think really know.
No, they don't. And a lot of people know it in their human life. So they may have experienced it with their children or in their workplace in terms like mindfulness and holistic. It all works together. It's very similar. Cognitive behavioral therapy and positive reinforcement training and balance training, in relation to dogs, they adhere to the methodologies that they follow. So conditioning methods rely on reinforcements to teach behavior, to encourage wanted behavior, and with balance training, as it's called in the dog world, to discourage unwanted behavior. Cognitive behavioral therapy changes perception to change behavior. So there's a couple different ways that, yeah, exactly. You know all about this. Um, so the first thing is changing the dog's perception of the human. So I have created exercises that are dependent to each dog, and we go through that with my client to determine what those exercises are specific to that dog to change the perception of the person. And then once that bond is built and that perception is there, then we can move forward with the skill set. So what's transferred forward is the skill set, and what's built and bridging the gap between where my client wants to be and where we're at is all skill set, as opposed to reinforcements. And again, one way isn't better than the other. They just follow a different platform.
Okay, well, I remember you saying when you and I were first starting to put the show together, you were saying that a lot of times the human doesn't realize that they are the problem. And it's very difficult to say, hey, you're the problem, it's not the dog. So I know that you and Roman share in that viewpoint. So it's a kind of a slippery slope when you're talking
Sort
to?
of. I would say my clients, I don't know if they're the problem as much as just they just need to change their mindset. And they're willing to change the mindset and they're trying, but it can be a challenge. It can, because it's
Right.
very strong in the dog world right now to encourage wanted behavior and discourage wanted behavior through reinforcements. But when you get dogs that already know right from wrong, or they've lived on the street and they've learned for themselves what works for them, you can't just tell them something is right and something is wrong. You have to provide them with the skills that allow them to make those decisions and to learn that they don't have to do that unwanted behavior in order to achieve their goal. So it's a totally different process. So once my client changes their perception, which is what my podcast, the first season of my podcast talks a lot about, is just changing that mindset from what do I do when my dog does X behavior? What do I do when my dog does the right behavior? What do I do when my dog does the wrong behavior? We don't worry about that at all. That's just not the approach that cognitive behavioral therapy takes. We build skills completely at a separate time. So I don't know. I find my clients probably more than anybody blame themselves. They think they're doing something wrong and they're blaming themselves when really it's the system that needs to provide them with the skills so they can know when to say, hey, this isn't working for me and this isn't working for my dog and I need something different. And then when we start working together, that light bulb goes on. It's so cool to see. Like, it's so
Yeah.
fun. The CBT is just so creative and individual, provides options. It's proactive, it's bonding. And my clients will just, and they just see, at first it's a little, sometimes they're trying to get their head around it, but like I said, sometimes they're familiar with it, maybe from their workplace or something that they've had, such as perhaps an eating disorder, or trying to rehabilitate someone with maybe a criminal background. So cognitive behavioral therapy is used a lot with humans. So people will say, oh, this is like this, or this is what I did with my child, or this is what was done in our workplace. And once they start seeing it that way and they start to compare it to their own selves and what they've done, it's just a beautiful thing, because then they're excited and they see it in their dog and they see changes in their
Right.
dog. And it's like, right, I get it.
So, Roman, on a parallel thinking, this kind of goes along in the same veins that you do with cognitive. Do you practice cognitive behavioral therapy?
That too. My
Okay.
reason why I'm saying holistic is because there are multiple things there that we are working on, including cognitive behavior therapy. Um, I wanted to add kind of for people better understanding the concept where we're coming from cognitive behavior therapy, and of course, Billy, correct me if I'm wrong here. We come from a perspective that thoughts create feelings, feelings create behavior, and behavior reinforces thoughts. So we have this triangle that we always have in mind, because no matter where you're starting, you always see the connection with those three levels. So while other people are focusing on behavior, trying to modify behavior by force or classical conditioning, and forcing the dog into a behavior because we are feeling pleased about it, it's not really helping the dog, because the behavior affects the emotion and emotion will affect the thought. So unless I control or I help the dog function in that triangle, exactly in the center, I'm creating the dog's an unbalance. So cognitive therapy is not just playing around with words and trying things, it's really understanding the whole concept of a balance on that triangle. And that's why I like Billy, because what she does is she doesn't focus on the corner, she's focusing on the center. She wants to keep that balance in the center of the dog, because that's what dogs want to do. They avoid negative thoughts. They avoid feeling stressed. They avoid putting themselves in danger by offering behaviors that eventually put them in danger. It's our people who have a problem with judging behavior and not seeing the whole concept of it.
Yeah. Very, very, very good.
I
So,
totally agree. And there's different ways that I use to explain that to people. One of them I can go over one. It's an interesting, people seem to like it. It's a lot of my clients, their dog is good 95% of the time. And when I say good, this is often where they don't really have to do a lot. The dog just kind of naturally knows the expected behavior, and they're a good dog. And then 5% of the time, the dog is doing a behavior in which the person hires me for. So they hire me for that 5%. But in the dog's mind, they're doing exactly what they feel they need to do and what they've learned they need to do to achieve their goal 100% of the time. There is no difference in the dog's mind between that 5% and the 95. So we actually build the skills in the 95 and transfer them to the 5, so that to the dog, we're working with them 100% of the time and building
very good
skills. I think that was a fair bit of what Roman was saying as well, where you're not just focusing on that negative behavior, because it's not negative behavior. It's exactly the same to the dog. So if you're only reinforcing the 95, they're like, well, I would have done it anyway. I get it. Yeah, it's fine. And then if you're trying to, you're like, yeah, sure. Well, that's fine. And then if you're trying to discourage the 5%, they're thinking, no. So you have to work.
I like that behavior. Yeah.
And then you get your holistic, right? So I think just with, so I just have an exact process and program, which is flexible and adaptable, but I've taken those concepts, those larger concepts, and I've put it into a program that I go through with my clients. And then I would like to, obviously my goal is to teach it on a larger scale so that it's easy for people to go back, just like anything that is a program where it's flexible. That's why I love so much about CBT, is it is flexible and adaptable, and people learn the overall and then they funnel it into their specific needs. And that's what my program does. So when I'm working with clients, I'm not necessarily going through this with them. I mean, they're not learning cognitive behavioral therapy and how to teach it to every dog. But I, in my mind, am referring back to my program and formula. And we stick with that and go through. And it's quite simple. It's quite fun.
Okay, so how did you learn what you know, and how did this lead to the creation of Upward Dogology? And I know you had a story to tell about your background and what happened when you were young. Did you want to share that with the audience or not?
Yes, actually, I've never shared it before, but I'm comfortable on your show, and I think your platform relates to that. But those are two different questions, actually. The first, to answer the first question, I'll keep it short, but it is 3 decades. So 3 decades ago, and I'm mid-50s. So 3 decades ago, I just, as a young person, just kind of not a lot of direction going on. I decided that I was going to take in dogs and work with rescued dogs. And I was traveling in the States in a renovated bus with my boyfriend at the time. And we started to take in dogs, and we both had rescued dogs. And to make a long story short, that developed and developed, and we had an intentional rescue. And then I went up to Canada, and I think a lot of people agree that, working, having a daycare, I had a daycare in Toronto. This is long before daycare was popular, long before internet. And I took in rescued dogs. And as I was working with these dogs and with these people, which is so interesting to work with people, because they tell you what they're feeling, what they're doing, what they know, what's working, what's not working. And I learned that adolescent stage was a big struggle for people and for rescue organizations. They were struggling with those dogs in the adolescent stage, and as well the dogs that had disadvantaged pasts or unconventional upbringings. And a lot of the adolescent dogs had quite great upbringings. Like, the people had all the right intention. They did everything. They did their puppy training. They did their socialization. They did everything right. And they hit the adolescent stage. And it was just like the guy at the party with the lampshade on his head. There was just no control. So this really started to intrigue me. So I just worked with lots and lots of these dogs and lots of these people. And then fast forward to a decade or a a little bit more than that ago, I took the time to figure out what it is, what I was doing. What I was doing was different. And that's when positive reinforcement training hit the scene, as well as alpha and dominance. And I learned from my clients what I was doing was different. I spoke with psychologists and veterinarians and animal scientists, and that's when I just formulated what I do. And the last decade's been just hundreds of clients every year, teaching it to them and honing it. And it became an unintentional career. I wouldn't be a dog trainer if it wasn't for CBT. And if it wasn't really making a difference and intriguing, it's just, I think Roman's the same, where it really has to reach that passionate part where you just want to keep dogs out of shelters and keep them in good homes and get them in good homes and help people that are helping dogs. There's a lot of blame on people, but I think there's a lot of people that are really trying really hard and they feel like they're failing their dog. And then when you come along with this, it's amazing.
Yeah,
So
I can see Roman has something he wants to say on that, because he's always talking about that. It's the people. If the people were educated, the dogs would relax. Sometimes they want too much. They expect too much from their dogs rather than just letting them be dogs.
I think what we're struggling with, Billie, is we're dealing with two sides. We're dealing with the dyad between dogs and people, and so we have to kind of diminish negative thoughts of people blaming their dogs, and then we have to help the dogs change the thoughts about what people are here for. So while we're doing what we do, we're building secure attachment relationship. It's unavoidable, because why would the dog change if the person doesn't change? Why does the person expect the dog to change if he's not willing to do the work? So we're working on two directions. The difference is people can talk, dogs show their emotions. And on the other side, we have to break those misconceptions of people that thinking that control is what changes the dog. Sometimes you have to let go of control so the dog takes control of the situation because he's afraid not being in control.
Yeah.
And then we have to take consideration that we have to break through taboo words like dogs are emotional beings, dogs are sentient beings. You have to treat your dog like you would treat a human because they are both emotionally intelligent. And so fighting through these ways out, we are blamed by trainers of, you guys have not worked with aggressive dogs. You have no clue why I'm using, aversive tools because, you only can work this way or the other way. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me get out the prong collar. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those, that was well said. There's a lot of things there that Roman was saying. I think a lot of the negative methods would, if CBT was incorporated into mainstream dog training, we wouldn't need, I think a lot of people use those because they're frustrated or they just don't know what else to do. And unfortunately, sometimes in the moment it works. In the long run, it's not great. Even in the short run, often it's not great. But if we incorporated CBT along with the positive conditioning methods, including classical encounter, then we just wouldn't even need to have that debate. And a lot of those people would, I think they would really enjoy CBT. There was one thing you said, Roman, that was funny, because I've had my clients say to me, I feel like I have more control, but I'm less controlling. And it's such an interesting statement because that's exactly CBT. It's almost like with people when you make it think it's their idea. So, that honey-do list, you make them think the honey-do list is there. That's what my formula does, where I've actually learned from the dogs how to do that, how to switch their brain so that they're making options and decisions and they're viewing the people as knowing what they want and knowing that they can listen to that person to get what they want and that person understands them. So it's not just kind of this airy, we have to read and communicate. It actually is a way of achieving that. the same that you would do with children or that people that you know. There is a technique for it, and that is what I learned from dogs. And it's actually quite simple, but it is dependent on each dog. So the dog views us differently, and then from there we move forward, which is what Roman was saying. But you need less control, fewer rules. I'm a hippie by nature. I'm honored. I'm honored to be on this on Remembrance Day and Veterans Day, because it is, although it's war, it's also all about peace, and that's how you need to be. And dogs to me are the epitome. And of course, without the horses and the dogs, the animals who deserve tribute for this special day as well. They contributed a lot as well, including their lives. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. But the way that I feel sometimes that the overall is becoming in the right direction, where trainers are saying we need less control, or we need more control, I guess, but less aversive methods. But they need to leave that umbrella of conditioning techniques in order to achieve that, in order to achieve a holistic approach, in order to achieve communicating with a dog on a different level, to have fewer rules, to be able to adjust and adapt to each individual dog. They're all saying this, the human animal bond. In order to do that, the platform of conditioning techniques are just not designed to do that. That's not just dog training. Conditioning is designed to teach right from wrong. That's what it is to do. So it's great for puppies, and it works with some dogs. But to really be able to change the way that we work with them, it needs to be okay to leave that conditioning umbrella, to leave the need of reinforcements, and to move over to the platform and the design of CBT.
Okay. I totally, everything that you said to me, the one thing that I caught more than anything is that you said you take the time to learn from the dogs. How
Yeah.
many people don't do that? They always assess their dogs as not, and the only thing they look at is just the bad behavior. They don't look at all the wonderful things they do that are good. They pick out that one small thing and then help, help, help. My dog is a yucca dog. I want to get rid of him. I want to bring him back to the shelter. I want to relinquish him. I'm going to get another one instead. Just don't take the time, but yet that dog sits there and looks at you, observes, and totally wants to please you, and people just don't get that. Roman, I know you want to say something.
Oh, just because I hold my mouth?
No, I thought you went like that. Sorry.
No,
Okay.
well, I have not much to add here, because you're basically spot on stuff. I just want the people to be encouraged to, or trainers or colleagues, to stay away from classical conditioning only. I'll just give you an example. I asked my dog to sit in a trouble situation. By sitting, I push the dog into an emotional state, and the dog is being trapped. And then I want to give him a treat for that, because he's very obedient sitting here, while internally he's falling apart because running away is what he wants to do. At the same time, I'm forcing the dog nicely and politely, totally positive reinforcement, to get stuck in an event that actually causes more trauma than help. If I don't see the whole concept, why the dog feels a certain way and why forcing the dog into obedience is not the right way to do, we have to kind of snap out of that idea.
Yeah.
And we have to look as professionals. We put dogs in a human environment that is so confined with so many regulations and structures, not recognizing that a dog is actually an independent animal. They're not even pack animals, they're social animals, which means they do just fine on their own, but they're smart enough to say, hey, if I team up with you, I'm going to do better and survive better. If you saw in nature, you would not see dogs less than 3 in a group and not more than 13. Why is that? If there were pack animals, we will have a herd of dogs walking around.
Yeah, right.
Right? But no, it's not. And otherwise, if that would be the case, then we wouldn't be able to live with one dog. We would have at least 5 dogs in the house, because otherwise the dog would not feel fulfilled. Yet they bond with people. So if we have this ability of dogs bonding with people in a certain way that people bonding with people, then we're looking at a species that completely different than the regular species are. We have an emotional evolution that we actually have to look into closer. And people like Billie are these people actually paving a path beyond the concrete. And even if there is no, scientific evidence that cognitive behavior therapy works on dogs, because we want to see the word dog in that document, we're not recognizing that dogs are kind of emotionally intelligent, like a 5-year-old. So you can make that connection and go beyond that. It says, okay, now we are here. Science, can you catch up with that? Okay,
Yes.
we shouldn't get stuck with science. Science is not the frontier. People like Billie are the ones who go beyond that and says, hey, it's there. How about you guys check in on that and see what you can get from here? This is how
Right.
like find the reasoning.
Science is interesting. That's a really interesting point you brought up, because it's very big right now. And I know it's off, and I am going to get back, Kathy, to my story. But I love some of my more recent episodes on my podcast have dissected scientific studies, because they actually prove upward dogology. They're not intending to. They weren't intending to do that, but they prove that dogs can think cognitively. They prove that dogs can decipher objects, object permanence, where a place is, that they have emotions, that
They
their body
grieve.
language, right. A more recent one, which was great, talked about how dogs will change their ears or their tail or something when they hear something that they recognize. That's cognition. And that is one part of my formula where I ask my clients, when you do these exercises that are reaching the cognitive side of the brain, make a note, send me a text, send me a video of what your dog does, because that's individual to your dog. It might be the ears. Sometimes they stop breathing and their little lip goes up. It's hilarious. But that's them thinking cognitively. And so, to Roman's point, there's Roman thinking cognitively. So imitating a dog, I do it all the time. It's fantastic. So yeah, that science is actually doing these studies that prove what I do, prove upward dogology in smaller increments and break it down. So then for science to say, no, we have to have conditioning, it's almost like they go backwards. It's like they're right there, and trainers are right there, and they're saying all the right stuff. And then, they go back to conditioning. And again, there's nothing wrong with conditioning, but it's a different platform, and it's not always going to work with these dogs that are already, it's like the difference between a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old child. If they're already starting to develop their cognitive skills and they're making decisions based on their cognitive skills, as a parent, it's good to harness those. You can't just go back to how you raised your child as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. You need to develop with your child. It's the same
Right.
thing.
Right.
I
Okay.
feel like key here is we need to understand from a pet industry, if we open the channel to reach the dog's potential,
Yeah.
It is directly connected of how we treat animals, which then creates another problem. If we accept that level of letting go of control and going into cognition of dogs, then we have to say, and how about pigs? And how about chickens? And how about the cows? And all of a sudden, this will be kind of like an avalanche of decisions that have to be changing, and the whole meat industry will change. So I totally understand why scientists don't touch it. Like, I want to, but somebody tells me not to, because it's going to change the way we think. We have to change the way we feed. We have to change the way we treat animals in the house. We have to change the way we apply medication. We have to actually ask consent from a dog to get him a medication, right? But that consent is also part of cognitive behavior therapy, because you cannot apply it if you don't have consent from a dog.
Right, right. Yeah, like you said, forcing them to do something they don't want to do, and they're not going to learn from it. They're going to realize they're forced, and it's not a condition they're going to feel comfortable with. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Okay, so Billy, do you want to tell us the story?
Well, I just learned it myself and I'm really still trying to formulate it, but I just love it because it really opened up my mind to why I do what I do. And it was at the very beginning of 2020, early January, I received a phone call and it was midday, so I figured it was somebody contacting me about training. And the man on the line, he was very polite and he asked me if I was born with the name Leslie and if I was born in Port Credit, Ontario, Canada. And I was, and I don't hide those, but not a lot of people know it. He introduced himself as to that he knew some people I knew and he name dropped. And I do know those people. They're about 10 years older than I am. And I still keep in touch with them. And he said that he saw me on LinkedIn, which was interesting because at that point I had just started to become active on LinkedIn. He said that he saw what I did for a living and he felt this need to contact me because of a story that happened during my childhood. And I knew what happened to me when I was 7 as a child. And he knew I knew, but he wanted to talk to me about this particular story that involved him because he felt it had a lot to do with why I ended up doing what I do for a living and being so concerned about dogs. So he asked me if he could tell me the story. I said yes. So when I was 7 and he was 17, he had a family pet dog named Flash. That was a great dog, just a great family pet. There's Flash. That's the picture he sent me. And he said Flash left for some reason, took off. And of course, no internet or social media back then. So it just had to get around town that his family had lost their family pet. And word got around that I guess my parents had taken in Flash and was trying to find the owners for Flash. So Peter came over to my house and he got his dog. He was so happy. He loved my parents. He came in and he sat down and he talked with them. And he said he saw me, but I was really shy and I still am really shy. I didn't really say a lot. He was just so happy to have met my parents, thought they were wonderful people. He left. And then the night after the following night, my parents were killed by a drunk driver. And this greatly affected him. And he saw me a little bit later. He thought it was maybe a couple months later in the school field, playground, large, backed onto a river. And he was playing catch football with his friends. And I was walking through. And he knew that there was, struggle with challenges with where I was to go. And people were nervous to adopt and take in. And there's just so many challenges with that. It's not that people aren't good people or they don't want the best for me, but it's challenging. So he didn't come over and talk to me. And I guess he's always felt guilty. This was just a guilty. He didn't know what to say to me. He didn't know. And he realized later, I'm that same person. I'm just a little girl. And he always felt very guilty about that. And he just felt the need to tell me that story. And shortly after that, I had already planned a trip to Toronto for business reasons. So he and I connected, which was great. We saw each other and just chatted about family and the people that he knew, that I knew, and my parents. And it really made a lot of sense for me because I started to think about how people were uncomfortable. And on that same trip, a friend of mine who I'd known from kindergarten, who we had separated ways on and off, and she didn't know the story about Peter, but she asked to meet with me and apologized for not being a good friend and for being uncomfortable and not being a good friend and accepting me and bringing me in with her group. And it was a very emotional time. And again, this was only a couple years ago, so I'm still taking it in. But people do have a hard time they want people to do well, or dogs. And I guess I just took this and I took it over to dogs. And we can do this. We can bring dogs in that have past that we don't know, or we don't understand, or we don't know what that might entail when we do bring them into our home. But we can do this. And that became my goal, to be able to help people do that.
Well, sharing that story, Billie, I'm almost in tears listening to that, because it's hard for you to talk about it, and we really do appreciate that you would share your soul with us right now, because I know what you're doing is equating your experience to what a dog goes through. When a dog has been displaced and something happens, people will judge based on that, but you're still that same person inside. That's still the same dog inside. Oh boy, I'm going to cry. That's really emotional for me.
Thank you for
So
that opportunity.
yeah, I know that you said this is the first time you've actually shared the story publicly, and you were nervous about it, and thank you for sharing it on our show.
Thank
Really
you.
do appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it takes a lot to process it. I really appreciate Peter sharing it, and I appreciate your platform for me to share it.
So, with that in mind, why are you so dedicated to dogs with disadvantaged past? Does this stem from your past? And that was the question I should have asked you before we went into that. So
I
what were,
I I think it is. It's so nice
yeah,
for me to be able to say, "Wow, I have a reason." People
yeah,
have always
right.
said, "Why do you do what you do with dogs?" And I've always just said, because I can, because I've learned from dogs how to help people, but to know that it actually stems from something more
And it
is
helps
important
you
for
too,
me.
doesn't it? It
It
helps
does.
you. It
It
helps you to
does.
grow. Every time you see a success story, and you know that you contributed to the well-being of that animal, it blows your dress up. It has to. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gaetan, you look like you wanted to say something here. You haven't, but how are you? Isn't that a beautiful story that
it,
Billie
it,
shared with us?
it's very profound story. It's very touching. I'm also very touched by that, very emotional about that, and
Thank you.
I I just want to know more about what she's doing, because this is like, yeah, okay, let me know
Yeah.
more, because this is like fascinating to me.
Well, Roman, you actually had a number of groups that deal with people that have had disadvantages, or they've been displaced, and etc. So I could see in your eyes that you were responding to Billie, because knowing that there are other people that have been displaced. I mean, it's got to be horrible, Billie, knowing that your parents had passed away, and this guy, all these years later, came back and recognized and associated with you. That's a beautiful thing.
Well,
So,
first of all, I appreciate Billy for sharing her experience, and I also appreciate her for making actually her trauma her superpower, which is something not many people dare to do. Um, we see that her experience going through life helps her be more empathetic with the situations and clients she's working with. I don't wish anyone to go through this process to do what he does, but we have to take in consideration by understanding what trauma looks like and how it feels like. It's easier for us to do the job the way we have to do. And I can kind of guarantee it, but I'm sure more than 90% of all psychotherapists have severe trauma that they're working through it through their daily lives. So when we do behavior therapy, it's not just helping the dog, it's also helping the people. At the same time, we're helping ourselves. It's kind of a relationship healing session for all of us. We are just more aware of the situation. We try people to catch up with the situation, because I know from a fact that people adopt dogs. They are prone to adopt or work with dogs who have similar core traumas.
mhm.
So we are healing ourselves by applying the way we help ourselves into the
Yes,
as well. We can start as much as we want, but if we're not empathetic with it, it's not going to work. And so again,
right.
I appreciate you opening up and being in that healing process by just sharing with people. You become one with those people who haven't opened up yet. It doesn't matter what it is, but we have to see that trainers are not super heroes. We're just people like you and me that just conscious about stuff. And this is what path is, and opens up for other peoples to heal as well. We're just regular people who had the advantage to open up for our feelings and open up that Pandora box and deal with it. So,
Right.
welcome to the Club of Survivors.
That was very well said. That was very well
Yeah.
said. And it is so true that people, if they can take what they know and their experience, and it made me think that I think that's why I connected with the dogs that were a little bit older, because it's an awkward time to have a change. And I think for me as a child, the person that related to me differently, and that's the same with trainers, I think. Yeah, it's so interesting because how I relate to dogs and how I treat them and respect that they have thoughts and feelings and experiences. They weren't, before they met me, they learned. And that's like a child when you're 7. I mean, I can go into a new home, but I had a life before that. So the people that asked me what was important to me, and the people that learned who I was and what was important to me, instead of telling me all the time their rules and what I have to do, I connected and bonded with those people a lot more because they were interested in how not I felt necessarily about solely the bad situation, but just what's important to me. Was it sports, or was it, just who I was as a person? And I think, knowing that and thinking about it, as Roman said, and taking what's important to you in your life and then using that to help others, and makes you more empathetic. So
Yeah.
it is really interesting to learn what you do from a psychology point of view, instead of from just learning dog training, which is, I think, really where Roman's coming
Right.
from, and exactly what he said. It's not just about dog training, right? It's about relating and learning and thinking, that's working, that's not, that's working with this dog, and hundreds and just learning from them what really resonated with them, and then taking that. It's important.
Right.
It's so important. Sorry, I'm kind of babbling here, but
That's
it's
okay.
No, that's
absorbing everything that Roman was saying. Gaetan as well. Thank you for that as well. Yeah, it's so much to absorb.
So the last question is, what is your mission, and how are you achieving this?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question too, because my mission has changed over 3 decades. You get so proud when your business does well, and you've got lots of people contacting you, and you get referrals, and veterinarians, and I even have veterinarians as clients, and that goal of having that successful business and really learning what I do. And then I have my book and my podcast, but it's that evolving. I think we all know, as an entrepreneur and as innovators and creators and passionate people, that keeps evolving. So my mission now is to connect and collaborate with the organizations. And maybe I've done a big circle right back to animal welfare. I love the animal welfare organizations that are out there now to make CBT mainstream, and not have it so different and weird, and have everyone be able to learn it. And whether that's through connections with animal welfare or veterinarians or scientists or organizations that have dog training schools and programs, that's so I appreciate this ability right here, this opportunity to create awareness, because that's really what it's all about: collaboration and awareness.
Well, you know what, Billie? I just, through the private chat, I've heard from both Roman and Gaetan. We don't want to rush, and there's so much more we want to talk to you about. Is it possible for you to be on our show next week to do
Wow.
another follow-up, so that we can finish with this, because we've got so much more that we want to share, and we would be honored if you would consider being on the show next week.
Wow, I'm honored. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much. You guys are so great. Oh, this is fantastic.
Okay,
There's part
well,
of my mission solved right there. There you go.
all right. So final thoughts, Gaetan.
Thank you for accepting our invitation, because it's very profound what we discuss, what you share with us today, and we want to know more about your experience with dog, which will be probably the topic of next week, because we were planning to talk about your experience with dog. And thanks for what you have, what everything you share with us today. I'm profoundly touched by that. I'm very happy to hear what you said, and I'm with you 100%. I'm with the approach you propose and Roman proposed. I'm 100% with that, and I don't want to rush the end of the show. Say, oh, by the way, how you do that with the dog? Why don't we keep that for next week, and go more in the daily
In depth of what you've
practice?
done.
Yes,
Yeah.
the daily activity you have with dog and your interaction, and some case study that can be very impressive.
Thank you.
That
That's
I yeah.
fun.
Okay. And Roman, final thoughts.
Uh,
Roman at his best.
Mwah, 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 mwah.
Thank you,
It is
Roman. That works.
always great to see colleagues where you kind of like, I just heard myself talking about stuff,
Yeah.
It's a confirmation that we're not alone. And I remember back then, I think it was 2007, where I was start talking about stuff, and people are like, "You're crazy,
Yeah.
like you're nuts, you have no clue about dogs, And I was like, maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong. And I'm lucky that I'm kind of so stubborn that I said, no, I'm gonna prove it. And I feel like there's always this justice of seeing other people going the same path and having the same struggles, coming from the same trauma, and like, I think this is the right way to go. It's kind of like walking in the desert and find yourself into this lagoon. I was like, oh my God, we found it.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree. Absolutely. Because it's one thing for the dogs to prove you right, which I think the dogs prove us right every single day, and clients, but to find other people that have the same, it's beautiful. Thank you, Roman.
The appreciation from a colleague is higher value than the appreciation of a client. On the other side, the client is happy because he has his job done. But as a colleague, I don't have any personal benefit for saying, Billy's awesome, right? And at the same time, people have, we have, if we are upset about negative and punishing methods out there, and we're not reinforcing and supporting our own colleagues, then what we do is we just complaining about things. We're just kind of talking about politics, complaining about everything, and still go voting the same people we voted last year. Not talking about politics, but we need to support each other. We need to support and, give a material to people and share our experience. And that's why we're open about it. Otherwise, we'll be secretly talking about stuff, but no, Billy's coming out of the closet that says, hey, you know what? I have trauma. I'm dealing with shit. And I apply the same things that I apply to myself, I apply to my dogs, and it works just
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well said.
Okay, so to end the show in honor of Veterans Day, Gaetan has a video that he's going to share that he created a while ago. So go ahead, Gaetan. I hope you got the audio on.
Hopefully, that's it.
Okay, let's go. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
was beautiful. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And for those of you that would like to uh, go to Billie's website, it's Upward Dogology. I'll put it in the, actually, it's in the description. So please feel free to go there and learn more about Billie. And we'll see her next week. And thank you, everyone. Namaste. Thank you for
Thank you.
being on the
Yeah.
Thank you.
show.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.